And we're back with an update on that PC build, which has taken up residence in my brain, and I can't stop thinking about it, so I need to get this sorted one way or the other so I can get the rest of my brain back. First up, here is the old specification versus the new specification. Yeah, things have changed an awful lot. I went through all the comments, and yeah, there was a lot of really good suggestions there. There was several comments that pointed out that the spec seemed a little bit low, and I think that's more a difference in how people pick what they want to buy. Like, the easiest way to demonstrate that is a mobile phone. Like, my mobile phone is a piece of junk. It's not a piece of junk, but it's a G9 Motorola Power or something. It cost me 190 euros. It's pretty much a low mid-end phone, and that's pretty much what all my phones have been. But there's the other end of the spectrum where people like to buy something like, say, a high-end 800 euro phone, and then what they'll do is they'll use that for a couple of years and then they'll resell it on. So they'll make back about 600 on it, and that allows them to keep a high-end, premium quality phone. They get the maximum use out of it and then pass it on, and then they basically take the money they've made and buy another high-end phone. It's sort of a way of getting the benefits of a high-end phone without having to fork out a whole bunch of cash. Now, there's lots of people in the middle who might just buy a high-end phone and keep it for 6 or 7 years. But the advantages of being the sort of mid-end phone person who'll buy something around 200 euros, you don't really have to care about the phone as much. No need for a case cover, no need for anything like that, because you don't have to worry about the resale value. And at the same time, I've heard people complain like they don't carry cash because they'd be too nervous to carry cash around with them, and then they've got an 800 euro phone in their pocket. It's like, it depends which way you're in. So when it comes to the computer specs, I was basically going with that mentality. That's sort of the mentality I've always had when it comes to a PC. You pick whatever is the best bang for your buck, and usually it's like mid-range. You go mid-range, you're either a high or low-end mid-range, but it's always around the mid-range mark. There's always this case of diminishing returns when it comes to computer hardware, where that last 5% of gains will usually cost you about 30 or 40% more in money, as opposed to just getting the solid build. This here is logical increments. And for my build, this is pretty much what I did. I just came here, and this is a great way to figure out roughly what you're looking for in a build. Now, what you'll notice is there's sort of like a price point around, where is it? About here. Actually, wait a minute. First change. I can't really buy stuff from the United States unless I want to pay massive tariffs, so I have to buy stuff from inside the EU. Also, the UK left the EU as well, so can't buy from there. And Ireland's too small to have its own native support for, or sales of these things. So instead, I end up buying the stuff from Germany because I don't have to pay tariffs, and there's an Amazon in Germany, so it's not so bad. Though it increases the delivery time, but I can wait. I'm a patient person. Anyway, there seems to be this sweet point right now at about the 250 to 300 mark, where you can get a great amount of CPUs. And you'll see here, there's that little blue bar there, the single-threaded performance. And it's 104%, and it's basically versus they pick one chip as a benchmark, and then they basically rate everything against that. So there's sort of this point around here where everything's like pretty damn good, and it's all around the same price point, and it sort of depends on what you're looking for. Though the prices are not perfectly accurate. For example, if we grab this one here, this is one you can get off Amazon. It's 26.90 or 269 euros. But for some reason, back on logical increments, it shows up as 290. I don't know. This thing is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it definitely does allow you to get a bit of a lay of the land of what's a good build to go with. Now, as for its sources, like, this gets really complicated, but there's some fanboy stuff and taking sides on different brands and stuff, and it gets really complicated. So this is, as far as I can tell, this is what logical increments use to pick how everything is rated, because honestly, it gets really crazy on how this stuff is rated. If you do a Google for, oh yeah, best processors, this is what Tom's Hardware will bring you up. And there's a few different pages here you can go through and look at the specs. But if you go to something like CPU benchmarks or user benchmarks, this thing seems really weird. It basically says, yeah, Intel's awesome. Like, look at this. The average benchmark percentage is pretty much all Intel until you get down to like the 15th one. And I'm like, okay, that seems really weird because it conflicted with a bunch of other stuff I saw. And then it had this thing which kind of raised a bit of a red flag for me. Gamers that do not wish to pay marketing fees should invest in Intel's blah, blah, blah. It's like, who puts that on a review? Like, you might say, oh, it's not up to spec, but then I found this wonderful video. Where is it? Here it is. Two-Click Phillips. Two-Click Phillip? Yeah, whatever. User benchmarks. The April Fool that never ends. It seems there's some weird stuff going on over there, and basically they're slating most of the AMD processors. I don't know why. It's just you start getting into this stuff, and it gets really weird. Another good quick stop to maybe make sure you're not going insane, because seriously, after a while I thought I was. You just go in here and you can check the best sellers in computer processors on Amazon, and it tells you what's actually the best sellers at the moment. And here you go. They're pretty much the top 5 are all AMD. Now, this got me curious. What's going on and why is this massive change happening? And then I went down a bit of a rabbit hole. So it turns out for years and years, Intel was kicking the snot out of AMD. Just it was embarrassing the level of dunking they were doing on top of them. And AMD was set up a little bit differently from Intel. We'll short story this one. But basically, Intel actually design and produce their own chips. AMD would design the chips, but then outsource the production to this place in Taiwan. And what happened was Intel got as far as this 12 nanometer process, and all that means is they basically got down to a really small scale size of cutting stuff up with light. That's literally what you're down to at this point. They're etching stuff with light. It's kind of crazy. So they got down to 12 nanometer, which was really small, and they were ahead of everyone else. But then they got delayed. They never got down to the next step, which is supposed to be 10 nanometer or something like that. And AMD, they were still outsourcing their stuff to Taiwan, and Taiwan got better and better, and eventually they caught up with the 12 nanometer, and then they actually got ahead, and Intel kept delaying. I think they've been delayed for like 5 or 6 years now, or something crazy. So now AMD are on this 7 nanometer process, which is really small, and Intel are still stuck on 12. Now, fair dues to Intel, because those guys were basically working with, they couldn't get better hardware, and they kept having all these deadlines and stuff that needed to be done, and like I can imagine the design team were like, great, we're going to get access to this new nanometer process. Like, no. The engineering team messed up again, so you guys got to keep carrying us. But they did an amazing job holding it off. But I think it's just hit that tipping point where the performance gains that AMD are getting are just pushing Intel out. And there's a few things that sort of back this up. But major props to whoever's playing Taiwan in this edition. Taiwan is playing a hell of a game. You got to, like, Taiwan is, Taiwan and China, they used to be the same thing, and then there was a little bit of a revolution, and then it was the democracy versus communism. Communism won, and all the democracy people got kicked off to Taiwan. And it was basically just a matter of time before they were going to get reabsorbed. I've played that game. When your enemy is this large and you're this small, yeah, that's not going to last very long. But Taiwan managed to stick it out, and now they've got their hands on a massive amount of semiconductor production. I think it's 40% of all the world's semiconductors are produced here. And if you know anything about tech in the last year or two, the pandemic has revealed, you know what, we really need semiconductors. And this crowd are like, so you want to stop China taking us over? So they made cozy with the largest military power in the game. And they're like, yeah, you keep us safe, we'll keep you sorted with semiconductors. That is just like epic play. Well done, sir. Very well played. So, if you're trying to build a PC right now, what type of processor should you go to? And bearing in mind, I'm just a nobody off the internet and not actually specialized in this. And according to this, it seems to be this Core i5 11600K and the Core 5 5600X. Both of them appear to be pretty much of a muchness. Whichever one you can get cheaper is the main thing. It really doesn't matter. If you can check this one here, this one's like, 282? Wait a minute, that's a little bit expensive. What's the other one coming in at? Yeah, the 5600 is coming in at 2680. Honestly, whichever one's cheaper, I'd probably go with, because they're both so close, it's kind of ridiculous. However, since everyone was going with Ryzen, I decided, you know what, I'll just go that direction. But don't worry, I'm sure there'll be someone to call me a fanboy of AMD. It's pretty much, it seems, par for the course from all of my research. You can't pick one without having picked a side in this war. However, my processor choice got a little bit blindsided by a comment by Felendez. Here it is. Long story short, their point was that I was thinking from an old school point of view. I was doing this because I was just looking for a normal PC that I would normally use, but now I'd actually sort of made it part of my job and my life, and it was a productivity tool, I believe is the word. So if I was to, say, get a faster processor that runs, say, let's just say 5%, we'll cut it off at 5%. If I got a processor that was 5% faster, I could squeeze that little bit more performance out of Oxygen Not Included. Because it does take a long time to record those episodes once we get later in the series, because, yeah, the game slows down an awful lot. It's not very well multi-core optimized. So if I could just get 5% better performance by going for, say, a higher end and more expensive CPU, how much is it worth to me? Like, normally a 2% gain, even a 5% gain, not worth it for the cost. Like, the cost difference between this 5900 and this 5600 is about 240 euros. In the past, I wouldn't have cared. But the point being, if I could make a video 5% faster... Oh, rendering. I should come back to that in a second. But if I could make a video 5% faster or record it 5% faster because the game moves quicker, how much is that worth over the life cycle of the computer? And I mean, conservatively, you keep the computer for 2 years. That 5% getting it done faster, even if it doesn't allow me to get out more videos or if it's just more free time for myself, yeah, They made a very compelling point, and I changed my mind on that one. So that's why I'm going with the 5900X instead. This does take us along neatly to the time taken to render a video. And this is actually, until you've done it yourself, it seems kind of weird, but this video here, let's say, is 36 minutes and 51 long. This is one I made earlier. This is Rimworld for episode 45. This took 29 minutes and 26 seconds to render fully. I'm pretty sure I was using the PC at the time as well. These things render an awful lot quicker than you'd imagine, and as well as that, it's mostly based not on the CPU, but on the actual GPU, as in your graphics processing unit is the one that actually does most of the rendering. I had a problem in the past where this was taking 4 hours because I hadn't updated my graphics card drivers. CPU is more about recording the video, it seems. So getting a better CPU, not really worth it. And as for the GPU, well, this current GPU is allowing me to do this, so it's not like you need a massive good GPU to do that, though. Oh god. Once we start touching GPUs, that's going to be an even longer, more dangerous rabbit hole. With this new mindset acquired for building the PC, I went and made a couple of other minor changes as well. First one was the cooler. Normally I was just going to go with a big fan because, you know, it would cool things down, it would be nice. But instead I went with a liquid cooler. Reason being, just a little bit quieter. The computer is going to be in the room with me, and I can't really use an open microphone. I use a headset for all my recording because, yeah, there's just a little bit too much noise in this area. A little bit of making quieter fans would probably be a good idea. This stuff came well reviewed, so why not? I'll give it a shot. Worst case scenario, it's terrible and I'll get something else to replace it. RAM. This one actually turned out to be pretty easy in the end, even if I did have to research a bunch of stuff. One, if you're just getting some basic RAM and you don't want to spend too much money, 3200. Just go for 3200 clock latencies of about CL16. You're perfectly good. If you want to go for mid-range stuff, 3600 clock latency 16. And if you want to go for the really high-end stuff, go for it. It's not really worth the price performance. And even going this high, I'm not even sure it's worth it. But hey, you know what? If I'm going this far, I might as well get something half decent. This is the entire PC I sort of ended up building at the end of the day. There's nothing too crazy or fancy here. Most of the stuff is high-end-ish. Well, high mid-end, except for that 3080 RTX 3080. Do not ask me how I am obtaining this. It's not in my hands yet. Maybe it will be. I had to do stuff at a crossroads. You know, there was a contract in blood. Let's just say that this is a one-off, and I don't think I've got a second soul I can sell. So sorry, but yes, excluding that which shall not be talked about, we went with a nice little shiny case. You see, I'm not big into these RGB lighting. That seems to be a thing people value now. I really don't care. Having all those flashing lights, I just find it distracting. So I do get the appeal of doing that. You know, you spend all this money and time and effort building something, and honestly, I have put way too much time and effort into building this thing recently. So I understand why you'd want to show it off. It's just never really appealed to me for some reason. For those of you who are unfamiliar, this is the Steam Hardware and Software Survey. Anyone who's got Steam, they get requested to share their info. Not everyone does it, but a huge majority do. And it basically gives them all the information on your PC is related to how it games, pretty much. Like, you can find out what kind of VR headsets are popular, that kind of stuff. But say for CPUs, we've got Intel at 81.3% here, and then by the end, and then it's 72.6. They've lost about 9% market share. So that kind of indicated to me that AMD were the sort of the way to go at the moment. But God knows. Oh, but the reason I came here was primary display resolution. This is 68.4% of people out there are still using 1080p. Now, if you've never been big into display resolutions, 720p was the one before this, and this is 1080p. They sort of divide into each other, so if you record something in 1080p, it will scale down perfectly to 720p. A little bit less detail, but, you know, that's the point. But then there's the next step up, which is 1440p, and then there's 4K above that. So this here is 1440p, which is actually, if you multiply 720, that's, you know, an exact duplicate. So, you know, that's just how it works. Anyway, you'll notice here that this has actually gone up to 9.27%, which I think last time I was looking at this was about 4% last time I was building a PC, so I was like, I'm not going to bother recording or playing stuff in 1440p because there's just not enough people out there who could take advantage of it. But I think for now that I'm doing the upgrade, I'm definitely going to have to start recording in 1440p. I mean, it's the time to do that. Once you hit about 7% market penetration for technology, it's usually just on its way, and you can see it's gone up by 0.78%, or 0.78% in the last while also. So once I get the new PC up and running, I'll have to start recording, editing, and rendering in 1440p. That will affect the times a bit, but if you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it? You know what I mean? Before we go any further, I have a bit of a benchmarking request. As it is, we're not sure what exactly gives you the best benefit for or bang for your buck when it comes to playing Oxygen Not Included. It could be that a faster processor will do faster single-core performance, multi-core probably not, but it could be faster RAM timings, it could be a bunch of stuff. So if you have a half-decent PC, perhaps you'd like to do a little bit of testing for us. Now, this is going to be very basic because there is no built-in test function for this. So all I've done is I've created a benchmark save, and all you have to do is come in here and start it playing. Now, it's going to take it a few minutes here while the game catches up. It's on max speed, but it's going to take it a while before it hits that point. When it does, we'll pause. You don't have to do anything. You just let it play on until it hits that point. Then when it hits that point, break out a stopwatch on your phone. Like I said, we are not doing anything too complicated here. And see, it stopped. It stopped when it hits that point. Now all we're going to do is break the stopwatch out, and then what we'll do is we'll either hit the space bar or press the unpause button. And at the same time, we're going to start our stopwatch. Then this will start moving around again. And after 300 seconds of in-game time, well, this won't be real life time, it will hit the same point again and bing stop. At which point, if you could stop your stopwatch. For me, it took 2 minutes and 11 seconds for me to do 300 seconds in-game. That was just the speed I got. Now, if this game runs at triple speed when you're on this setting here, it actually, it doesn't even tell you just as fast. So realistically, I should have been able to do this in 100 seconds real time, but I wasn't because my computer's not fast enough to keep up with the game. So the theory being is if we could get a few people to maybe test their equipment, we could see what's actually working or what equipment works best. This here would be the type of information we're looking for. Just the processor you're using, graphics card, RAM, and speed of the RAM. Now, most of this information is pretty handily available, actually. If you just go into Task Manager on your PC, crack that open right there, go into Performance, and the first one up will be CPU. It'll tell you what your CPU is and what its speeds are. Memory, right here. You can find out that you have 16 gigs of RAM, and there's the speeds it's running at. Oh, by the way, if your speeds are running at 2133, you probably have not enabled XMP in your BIOS. That's just a common thing I've run across from people. So definitely enable it. I actually tested mine without XMP enabled, and I was on 2133 megahertz. And it actually slowed the whole thing down by about 10%. My computer runs 10% slower if you happen to enable XMP, so definitely check that in your BIOS. And finally, where was it? Where is our, if you scroll down here, you should be able to find your GPU and NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2060. Now, the cast latencies, you'll have to actually find a program to pull those if you don't know what they are. You can't pull them to the BIOS. If you can't get them, don't worry about it. This information here should be more than plenty to let us know what we need. But only do it if you've got the available time. I'll put up a thread on the Clay forums as well. You can either reply with your information in a comment or just send it to put it in the Clay forum that I've linked below. Now we're back on graphics cards. And the thing is, should you buy a computer right now? No, you should really not buy a computer. Unless you have no other choice, you should probably stick with what you're doing. Reason being is GPUs have just gotten ridiculous. And to just give you an example of how ridiculous it's gotten, we're just going to scroll down here. This is on Tom's Hardware. This is the average eBay price that graphics cards have sold for. One common recommendation was buy an older graphics card. This here is the RTX 2060. This is the graphics card I have in my current PC. I bought this over 2.5 years ago, and it cost me at the time in pounds a certain amount, but converted to dollars it was about $360 US. 260, which means, or 360. That means it's more expensive to buy that graphics card now than it was 2.5 years ago. In fact, I could sell the graphics card on my PC for more than I bought it for. When have you ever heard of technology or computers going up in value over time? They normally depreciate a massive amount. This is just, wow. Oh, also they've sold $292,000 worth of them, which is crazy. So that, for perspective, is how messed up the graphics card market is at the moment, where older graphics cards are actually selling like 2.5 years, maybe 3-year-old graphics cards are selling for more than you bought them for. It's just amazing. One very common recommendation I heard was buy pre-built computers. Normally this would be a no-no. You wouldn't get nearly as much good value. But Dell and larger providers, they have deals with these graphics card companies, meaning they usually end up with a certain supply. And yeah, they're going to mark them up a bit anyway, but it should come out an awful lot less than the scalpers are hitting you for. Though this here, let's say, this 3060 Ti, that would cost you about €740 on the open market if I bought it from Alternate, the place I'm buying from. So that means the other 750, 780 euros buys the whole rest of the PC. It's just, the customization options are not really what you would hope, and you're going to be left with a computer that doesn't quite do exactly what you want. Well, for me personally, if you don't mind too much, it can actually work. It could work out in your favor. It's just a case of with this one, you are locked into this. You can't actually change the memory. You can't change the hard drive. You can't change anything on these XPS towers, as far as I can see. You're sort of just stuck. You get what you get, and that's the end of it. Alienware gives you a different choice. This is where they do their Alienware PCs. These ones you can modify a bit, but it still seems odd. For example, if I modify this 5600 and I want to increase the RAM, because the RAM is only one 8GB stick, which, why can't I add more RAM? That just seems odd. there's all sorts of quirks to these, so eventually I just bailed. It was just too difficult to try and figure it out. And at the end of the day, you won't end up with what exactly you're looking for. But depending on your situation, it might be worthwhile looking into this. So why are graphics cards so expensive? Long story short, mining, all those cryptocurrency miners. Longer version is basically the pandemic. What happened was the pandemic hit, people got a little bit worried, and they figured cryptocurrency was a good hedge. Now, I'm not going to get into Bretton Woods or the gold standard or all of the insanity of fiat currencies and all that stuff. It's just a case of right now a bunch of institutional investors were like, hey, we can hedge some of our money in Bitcoin and Ethereum and stuff like that, and this stuff's going off the charts. And how that is actually ledgered or mined is with graphics cards. So about 15 to, I think it's 15-20% of all the graphics cards that are being produced now are just being bought up by these miners. And until the price of cryptocurrency starts going down, which I believe, yeah, China did a whole blanket ban, so maybe that'll help. I don't know. There might be hope ahead, but at the same point, it could go on for another year or two. God knows. And when it comes to fabbing these graphics cards, it takes them a couple of years, if not 5, to build a new fabbing facility. So yeah, this could be here for a while yet to come. So this is pretty much the final build. Barring any crazy comments down there to pointing out something really stupid I'm doing, this should be what I'll be going with. It'll probably be a week or two before I get the rest of get all the parts together and shipped and assembled and all that stuff. If you have any criticisms or recommendations, just let me know down below. It still does feel weird sticking that little monstrosity there on top. That thing has just a stupid amount of cores. But, you know, I'm sure I won't hate it, but it just feels a little bit odd building a computer in this range. Anyway, I hope I didn't get too wandery on this one, and good luck.